The easiest way to become a digital nomad, as those immortal words say, the answer is just do it. But you're here for more than that. I'm going to talk about the ways, as I see it, of becoming a digital nomad. I'll also talk about how the field of teaching English as a foreign language, or TEFL, fits in to that makeup. And then I'm going to talk about my experience, and stick around to the end because I'm going to talk about how Marcus Aurelius fits into the whole picture. Okay, so in terms of ways of becoming a digital nomad, I see three options. The first are remote jobs, gig jobs, and freelance on location jobs. Let me explain what I mean by those. So remote jobs, these still rely on a 9 to 5. So I'm based in Eastern Canada. Let's say I go to somewhere in Asia. Well, I'm still on Eastern Canada time. So if I have check-in meetings with somebody in the company, well, it could mean that I have a 3 o'clock in the morning time for a meeting when it's 9 a.m. here or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind. Sure, you might be completely remote. However, the times that you have to be available, sometimes it's referred to as core hours. You need to make sure that you're online or available for meetings for those hours. So that's one really big thing to consider when thinking about these remote jobs. Another kind of job could be described as a gig job or a deliverable-based job. So this kind of job, you're not tied to the 9 to 5 of a specific geographical location in the world. You are tied to a deliverable. So by August 29th, I need you to have A, B, and C complete and delivered to me. Often with these kinds of jobs, you're able to communicate asynchronously. So I work a lot in these kinds of situations whereby I will give updates on my progress with a certain job by recording a video or a screen capture video, and then the communication is done asynchronously through those kinds of videos, email, audio, all of these kinds of excellent tools. So that's another great option, especially if you don't want to be tied down to the 9 to 5 of a specific place in the world. The third option, as I see it, are freelance on location jobs. And this was actually my own entry into the whole world of being a digital nomad. So I started out years ago by doing freelance CELTA teacher training jobs. So this would mean that I would go to a location such as Durban in South Africa. I went there for between 2 and 3 months. I bedded in, I did my work there for 2 or 3 months, and then I moved on to the next location. So these are options out there, and that's really where I would see the whole world of teaching English as a foreign language actually tying in quite well with this kind of on location type of digital nomad job. I was able to go to South Africa. All I had to bring with me was my computer. I had all of my materials there. I had all of my lessons prepared and everything. So that was the digital aspect of it. But then the nomad aspect wasn't so much that I was nomadically working on my computer, although I brought that with me as part of my work. I actually had to be there. And personally, that was a wonderful experience. Great experience because I got the best of what I saw as all the worlds. I got to travel. I got to be quite independent. I got to meet people. I got to experience a new place. It was really wonderful. And I got to repeat that experience a number of times. However, now in more recent years, I've moved into more of the gig-based situation. And in fact, with a lot of my work here through YouTube, it's actually based on time zones. So, you can check down in the description below if you would like to get on a consultation call with me, which are free. And those are based on being in a specific place at a specific time. I have to be online at a specific time. So there's a whole bunch of ways that you really gotta think about what's the best option for you, or what's the best kind of mix of options for you. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to talk about my own experience. And there are highs and lows, and you need to go into this whole experience or life of being a digital nomad with your eyes really wide open. You know, if I can open up a little bit, I was in San Diego, wonderful location, beautiful. I absolutely loved it in Southern California. A number of years ago, when I got some bad news from home, it was actually my mother wasn't well. In fact, she was close to leaving us at the time, and being so far away from home. I'm from Ireland, so you know, if I was lucky to get a direct flight, which I did, thank God. In the end, you know, it's still about an 8-hour flight, and getting to airports and getting to various locations, you know, you're looking at a kind of a day to be able to get to where you need to be. So, you know, there are these lows of, you know, you're having this wonderful experience, but you're still tied to family and locations in the world. And, you know, obviously for me, being tied to my family it's a good, positive thing. But, you know, there are these things that you could face along the way. You know, of course, there are unbelievable highs as well. In that same trip, actually, I met some lifelong friends, saw some unforgettably beautiful places that, you know, I still want to go back to at certain points in my life. But I'm really just trying to communicate to you here, you know, get into this knowing what's in front of you. It's not like, okay, I'm going to become a digital nomad and I'm going to travel and only have wonderful experience and it's going to be bliss. Sure, there'll be moments of bliss, but sometimes, you know, real life does make its presence felt in, you know, big ways. Okay, so what is the connection with Marcus Aurelius and becoming a digital nomad? Let me read to you from Meditations by the great Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic. And he has provided all sorts of wisdom, but I like to dip into this book from time to time. And I just opened it up the other day when I was thinking about this video, and lo and behold, I landed upon a thought of his that I thought was really relevant for people who are thinking about setting out in this world as a digital nomad. So Marcus Aurelius says, "To what use am I now putting the powers of my soul? Examine yourself on this point at every step and ask, how stands it with the part of me men call the master part? Whose soul inhabits me this moment? A child's, a lad's, a woman's, a tyrant's, a dumb ox's, or a wild beast's?" Okay, so obviously, you know, this was written a couple of thousand years ago, but let's look at that list that he gives us and try and translate it for a 2024 digital nomad context. So Marcus Aurelius talks about, does the soul of a child inhabit you? Does the soul of a lad, a woman, a tyrant, an ox, or a beast? So let's translate those. A child, maybe that could be a person who is lacking experience or wisdom with which to base the next steps of their life upon. Maybe a lad could be somebody who's overconfident, not fully taking into account what could be some of the risks. For a woman, let's interpret that as the passion and emotion that we all as humans can experience, and how that can influence both to the benefit, but also to the aspect that we need to consider a little bit more. When he talks about a tyrant, let's interpret that as stubbornness. When he talks about an ox, let's think about that as being kind of pig-headed or ignorant. And a beast, let's think about that as being reckless. So let's get into them. So if you are a child, one who has little experience or little knowledge, you know, the obvious answer here is do your research, but don't stop just at the research. Ask people in your life, ask people who you trust, ask people who might give you an answer that you don't love, that maybe it's not the answer you're looking for. If you have parents around you, brothers and sisters, very close friends who you know are not afraid to say difficult things to you. Now, this doesn't mean that if they say the difficult thing or the thing that you don't want to hear, that you necessarily have to do that. I look at my own experience, and I did ask my parents and my brothers and sisters and friends about some of the moves I made in my own life, and they certainly had a lot of misgivings, especially my parents. When I look back on it, they often ask me, what are you doing with your life? Why are you doing this? And while I still went ahead with my nomadic life, it's not as if I did it in a way that ignored them. In fact, no, it made me consider what I am doing and why I'm doing it. And in fact, I think that's why I didn't end up just being this eternal kind of lost traveler. I found a career in it. I found a direction. I found something that I could make of myself. When it comes to the lad, I can remember some people I met, especially during my time in Brazil. A couple of people come to mind who I would describe as somewhat overconfident. These are people who just had all the answers. And in the end, sorry, but I found it a little bit insufferable. I found this I've got it all figured out approach, this lack of humility, this lack of openness, difficult energy to be around, and it was something that I certainly wanted to kind of distance myself from, because it kind of felt like a dead end to me. It kind of felt that, well, if I have it all figured out, then I have nothing left to figure out, so my mind ends up closing. Now, I certainly had some of this energy myself, especially in my early 20s. For sure, I thought that there was nothing left for me to learn, that I could basically tell everybody what was going on and that I was right every step of the way. Thank goodness at a certain point I had enough people around me who weren't just enablers, people who would kind of say, Fergus, cop on, what are you talking about? People who would question me, people who would help put me back on the straight and narrow. And I think I kind of snapped out of that over the years. But maybe, examine yourself and ask yourself, do you have a little bit of this lad energy? And maybe do you need to question some of the things that you base all of your decisions on? Especially when it comes to being a digital nomad, are there aspects of living and working in this or that country that maybe you haven't quite thought about? Maybe might not fit with the trajectory of your life, maybe immediately, in the medium, or the long term. Okay, so maybe the most difficult one of Marcus Aurelius's list to really interpret in a positive and good way was where he says, is it the soul of a woman who identifies you? And let's take that as emotion and passion. And I think back to a couple of experiences in my own life, in my own experience as a nomad, a digital nomad, where it was very emotionally difficult for me and my passions kind of boiled up. And in some ways, it was an advantage. In some ways, it was something that I needed to get a handle on. I think back to one time in particular. I had just come back from South Africa. My visa process to become a permanent resident here in Canada was ongoing. And I talked about this in more detail in a recent video about whether it's worth coming to live in Canada. But I had gone through this very long, bureaucratic and arduous process of gathering documents from all the countries that I lived in my life up until that point. And then just as I was at the finish line, it seemed like Canadian immigration just decided to change the rules and they asked me for yet more documentation. And I felt like personally aggrieved. I felt, this is not fair. Listening to my emotions and listening to my passion in that moment actually didn't give me the right answer. I just said to immigration, hey, look, I've done everything that you've asked from me already and no more. A couple of days later, I had my visa in hand. I guess I called their bluff. So I guess my point here is listen to what you're feeling, listen to your emotions, because sometimes, they can be correct. Having said that, we can let our emotions and passions boil up. We can get angry, we can get overwhelmed, and we can feel defeated. In those kinds of cases, I think back to another story, a story that I read in a very famous book called The Gulag Archipelago, actually about the gulags during Soviet times, especially under Stalin. And I think about a story of a very inspirational woman who was being unfairly persecuted by those authorities. And they were trying to get her to admit to a whole bunch of lies that she knew were lies, and she just said no. And in the end, they couldn't stick anything to her and they just let her go free. That woman in that case was able to look at all of this torture, this emotional and psychological torture that the state and the authorities were putting her under and saying, no, okay, I could freak out here, I could lose it, I could get so passionately angry by how unjust this is or unfair, but actually, no, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. It's not true. I know it's not true, and I'm not going to agree to it. So in that case, that woman was able to look at the situation and she was able to balance it out with her intellect, with her mind, and use the proper part of her emotions and passion to push through it and get the fair, just, and right outcome in the end. How does all of this apply to being a digital nomad? Well, just look at these difficult situations that will invariably come up in front of you. You are going to be met with challenges. And remember, as I said, your emotions are valid and they will help you, but don't listen to only that part of your brain. Be like the woman in the gulag. Use that part of your brain, but also channel the other abilities that you have to make sure that you stay on the path that you need to be on. Okay, so let's talk about the tyrant. I interpret the tyrant as stubbornness. Again, looking at my own experience, I always wanted to come here to North America. I thought about the United States, I thought about Canada. And if I had pushed forward with that years before I did, when I actually wanted to do it, I probably wasn't in the right situation to do it, and probably my whole house of cards would have fallen down and maybe my North American dream wouldn't have worked out. Real tangible things to think about is, do you have a little nest egg? Do you have a little bit of savings? Because, moving here to Canada, it's an expensive country and it was hard to get started. I really felt like, oh my goodness, in some ways I'd made mistakes. And in fact, I burned through practically all of my savings in immigration, initial rent, and just living here. So, it's a challenge. Make sure that you're not just pushing forward with something blindly. Ask yourself, do you have a plan? Can you support yourself if things don't work out initially the way that you want them? Okay, what about that ox? Well, an ox is strong and takes big decisions, but they're also a little bit, let's say, single-minded. What I take from that for us as digital nomads is when we go to another country, it's not like an extended long-term vacation. My big advice, if you go to any country where they don't speak your first language, learn that language of the place that you're in. It might seem incredibly daunting. People have told me for years, oh, Portuguese is so hard, it's so difficult. It wasn't actually difficult to learn it. It just took some time. It just took some motivation. It just took some taking a little bit of a risk, getting out there, talking to people, being unafraid to mess it up, to get things wrong, to maybe sound a little bit silly. And that, that's a really big piece of advice that can come out of there, as well as, you might sound silly and that's okay. It's really good not to always take yourself so seriously. Be able to laugh at yourself from time to time. Don't be, debilitatingly self-deprecating constantly. Being able to just, laugh at the situation a little bit, it really, really helps. I can't stress that one enough. But going back to that ox, tell that ox, learn the language. It's not just about going to the galleries and eating the food and chilling out on the beach. Try to connect with the people. It's going to make your experience so much more enriching. And the last one is the beast. The beast I see as this reckless individual, no plan B. I talked about already, having a financial situation. Do you have a nest egg that you can fall back on if things don't go right? But also when you're in, this new country, this new part of the world, that you might have not a whole lot of cultural understanding or just knowledge about the place, you could very easily get yourself into trouble. Now, I think about 3 times I almost got myself into big trouble. 2 of them happened in Mexico at different times. One of them happened in Brazil. The first one, it might seem like a silly story, but it's true. I remember I always wanted to go scuba diving, and I had done some scuba diving in South Africa a few years before, had a wonderful experience, and I got my PADI certification. So I was like, okay, I'm certified, let's go and do some scuba diving. And I found this guy on the beach who was, yeah, I do scuba diving. I've got a company. I'll take you out tomorrow morning. Meet me here at 7 a.m. Let's go. I was like, okay, perfect. I got up, met the guy at 7 a.m. and we're going out on the boat, and we're out in these beautiful Caribbean waters, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is gonna be awesome. And the guy's just talking to me, and he's looking around. I said, oh, there might be some tiger sharks out today. And I was like, huh, what? And I said, well, what do we do if we see some tiger sharks? And he just blesses himself. And that was his only, response. He kind of laughed, and I was like, oh, okay. And maybe stupidly, I went ahead with it. I jumped into water, and I had this great scuba diving experience. I did put myself at maybe an unnecessary risk there. Thank God I came away with all limbs still attached, and no tiger sharks came and attacked me. But, I was certainly a bit reckless there. Another time that I can think about, maybe a little bit more reckless, I was out with one or two friends in this really nice place in a similar part of Mexico. We were out for dinner, and we just ran into some people at this bar that we were in, and they invited us to come to a party on a rooftop. And the party turned out to be just me, one of my friends, and these two other people. And my friend spoke no Spanish. I spoke Spanish, and these two other people were only Spanish speakers, so we were having kind of fun, having some drinks, and I was kind of a go-between there. But there was one of the two people that we met that I just didn't get, as the kids say, I didn't get a good vibe from him from the beginning. And as we went on through the night, it just didn't feel great, just the energy, and I felt that person, I could trust them less and less. Eventually I said to my friend, hey, it's getting late, let's go. And we went to leave. We climbed down of this rooftop that we were in the party with these people, and they climbed down after us. And I remember we were looking for a taxi, and these people just kept watching us from a distance, and it just kind of gave us a bit of a creepy feeling. Now, in the end, nothing happened, thank goodness. And I look back at that and think, I don't think I'd like to find myself in that situation again. Another similar thing happened to me in Brazil. Now, these countries I'm speaking about, Mexico, Brazil, big love for them. They're beautiful places, and wonderful experiences are there to be had, and wonderful people in these countries. I was in Rio de Janeiro. Now, I spent most of my time in Sao Paulo, but I was in Rio de Janeiro for some work. And again, it's in a kind of social setting. I was there on the beach, in the Copacabana beach, or as they say, Copacabana beach, late at night, drinking caipirinhas, which is a kind of, I guess, Brazilian answer to the mojito, and having a great time. And I met these guys on the beach. We were just chatting, me and some of my work colleagues, and I met these Brazilians. And because I speak Portuguese, I was having a good time just chatting to these people in Portuguese. I remember the conversation was all about how I believe that Ireland are the true actual winners of the 1994 World Cup, not Brazil. I'll get into that in another video. I have a theory which I think would stand up in a court of law. But anyway, back to the story about being on Copacabana beach late at night. And I was talking to these guys, we were having a good time, we were having some drinks. And then this kid, he comes up with this box of yogurts, I remember. And it was, it was warm, and it was late at night, and he starts handing out these yogurts. And then, similar to the feeling I got in Brazil, I just kind of got the sense that things could change pretty quickly. And I realized that this kid had been finding these yogurts or whatever in trash cans and stuff around the city during the day. And I kind of got the feeling that, okay, this is not really my crowd anymore, and I am kind of like obviously the outsider here. And again, even though I had one or two caipirinhas in me, I had the wherewithal to say, okay, it's been great, it's been fun, we'll take up the conversation about the 94 World Cup another time, I'm going to bed. And I just kind of hightailed it. Now, in all of these stories, nothing actually happened to me. So why am I telling you these stories? Well, I kind of went into them with a little bit of this beast, this reckless kind of energy. But in the long term, I look back at them and I try and learn something from them and try not put myself in those kinds of scenarios again. And I guess I'm another objective in telling you all this story is, these are things to consider. I don't want to scare you or frighten you and don't, follow your path if it is to be a digital nomad. Certainly not. Certainly go after that. But again, just go at it with your eyes open. Okay, so that's it for me. Remember, down below in the description, you will find a link that you can click on that link and set up a free consultation with me if you want to talk about goals, about being an English language teacher, maybe a coach, if you want to become a digital nomad. All of these things, I do offer an initial free consultation all around that. So go on down there, click on that link, set up a call with me. I'd be delighted to talk to you. I love meeting people from all over the world. As I guess many of you who are watching this video have similar feelings. So I really look forward to talking to you at some point in the future. If you like this video, if you found something valuable in it, it is the usual YouTube stuff, but I would be ever so grateful if you could give it a like, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell icon, all of those things so that you get more of these videos. I love making them. I love putting them out. I love the feedback. I respond to every comment that I get. And, if you think somebody else might get some value from this, if you know somebody who is thinking about this lifestyle as a digital nomad, then go ahead and share it with them. It really helps to get that word out there. Okay, that's it for me. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think about the Marcus Aurelius take on being a digital nomad? Let me know, have you thought about these 3 different ways that I mentioned of being a digital nomad, whether it be remote jobs, gig-based jobs, or freelance on-location jobs? Have you thought about these? Have you done any of them? What's your angle on all of that? What's your objectives when it comes to this world of being the digital nomad? Okay, that's it for me. All that's left for me to say is bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.